But yeah, my name is Maggie, and I'm so thankful for this church family. And I was very happy when Josh asked me to speak this morning. I love getting to share the word, and I've just loved this series on Mark. We're going to kind of revisit a little bit of the themes that we talked about when we did our settlers series. You guys remember at the beginning of the year we talked about the settler theology versus the townie citizen theology, where the settlers we see God's call to go and to be sent as opposed to just stay and keep law and order. So we're going to revisit some of those themes. If you know me, you know I pretty much preach the same sermon every time I preach. There might be a different text, but there's a central theme that I always bring out. And so I'm excited about this passage that we read this morning. I'm going to go back to the very beginning again. If you would look at Mark chapter 30, the very beginning. Or I'm sorry, not chapter 30, verse 30. We're in chapter 6. Mark 6:30. It says, the apostles gathered together with Jesus, and they reported to him all that they had done and taught. And he said to them, come away by yourselves to a secluded place and rest a while. And I love that. I love that they're so excited about the ministry that they've been doing. They're so excited about what they've just been teaching. They're so excited about the miracles they've just seen and performed. And Jesus is like, okay, it's time to rest. Are we good at resting? Are y'all good at resting? Some of you? No. Yeah, we don't. A lot of times we don't rest very well in our culture, do we? We don't value rest in our culture, do we? Usually, when we post on Facebook, we're like, or Insta, we're like, look at the cool things I'm doing, selfie, but we don't usually post like, oh, I'm getting good rest today, because we're not. We're being busy. And we need to come to that place of rest. This morning, we're going to just really look at a pattern that we see throughout. You can go back to 30. We'll stay at 30 for a little bit. We're just going to look at a pattern that's established in this passage because it's a pattern that we don't just see in Mark chapter 6. We see this throughout Jesus' life. So we see the ministry happening, and it's awesome, and then we see Jesus just inviting those closest to him to rest. And, we hear, if you're in the helping profession, is anyone in the helping profession or teaching profession? Have you guys heard, the word self-care, the phrase self-care? Everyone's talking about self-care. No? Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's becoming a little bit more talked about, especially if you work in maybe direct services or in counseling or in teaching. There is starting to, come up this thing like, hey, we might function better if we take care of ourselves. We might function a little better if we slept good, if we drank water, if we exercised, if we spent time with loved ones, if we relaxed, if we spent alone time with God. We might feel better. We might have a little bit more energy for some of this other stuff we see the apostles doing. But so we need to get better at that as a culture, as a people, because we see that it was super important to Jesus. This isn't just like a cool, trendy thing that counselors are saying, no, you should, self-care. This isn't like a secular thing. This is something that we see Jesus really driving home to his disciples over and over again, is that we need to retreat. We need to Sabbath. We need to have that sacred time, that sacred space where we rest and when we're alone with the Father. So we also, in this passage, just want to highlight that we see Jesus creating a feast in a desolate place. So the word desolate is used throughout, but in verse 35, the apostles are like, send the people away to go get food. They're going to get hungry. This is a desolate place. And I just think that that's something that's pretty common for us to do as well, as we kind of look at our surroundings and we automatically see what we don't have what we're lacking. And that doesn't matter to Jesus. What does Jesus ask? He asks, what do you have? And they present these meager pieces of bread, this meager fish. And Jesus creates a feast out of what they already had. And that's the mentality, I think, like when we start operating in rest, we start thinking more along those lines. We're not automatically drawn to what we don't have. We can actually see, okay, what has God given us? And how does he want to multiply it? How does he want to work miraculously through us, given what we already have? Desolate means barren, bleak, or bare. And it's oftentimes in situations that are barren, bleak, and bare that we see Jesus do the most incredible things. What we have to give might seem small, but Jesus can satisfy the hunger of thousands with just that little that you have to give. And that's hard to believe. Like, just let that sink in for a second. Like, God could satisfy the hunger, whether it be spiritual hunger, physical hunger. God could bring hope to the hopeless, satisfy thousands with his mercy, with his truth, and using you just with what you have. You know, you don't need your own church. You don't need a seminary degree. You don't need a YouTube channel with really awesome sermons. All you need maybe is just a dining room table and a meal to share. But God can work miracles with just the little that you have. And so if you'll put that pattern up on the screen, on the other 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, okay. Never mind. Sorry. Go back. You were right the first time. I was seeing multiple slides in the back. So we see this pattern. We see Jesus saying, okay, let's retreat, spend time alone with the Father, spend time resting. We see Jesus spending time with his tribe, with his 12, his crew. I call him the tribe. And then we see him going to desolate places. We see him working miracles. We see him healing. And then we see that retreating again, alone time with the Father. And so this is not just a pattern that he establishes in Mark chapter 6. This is what we see Jesus doing all the time. We see him doing awesome things, spending time with the disciples, and spending that alone time with Father. He's always looking for that sacred space to be alone with his Father. And so I'm wondering today, you can hear a message and it usually doesn't change your life, right? Like you can hear good stuff and it usually doesn't. You might not change any pattern in your life because of a sermon you hear, but when you start talking with friends and people that you love about those changes that you want to see in your life, sometimes that sparks some change in your life when you actually start confiding in the people that you're doing life with. Okay, I know I want to spend more alone time with Father. I know I want to rest with Father more. Or I know that I have this desire to go into desolate places and minister in a place, but I haven't done that yet. Or I know I don't have a tribe. Like I don't have anyone I'm discipling with. I don't have communion with the saints other than just sitting next to friends in a Sunday morning service. I want more of that. So I want us this morning, this is where we're going to get uncomfortable. We're going to get into groups of 3 to 5. So no less than 3, but no more than 5. And I want us to just confide in each other about this rhythm. Do we see this rhythm in our life? Is there places about this rhythm? Are there specific items in this rhythm that we're not seeing in our life? And do we want to make some changes to see that? And maybe specifically say, like, I really know that I need more sacred space alone with Father. Or confide in your group, I know that I don't have a tribe and I haven't been intentional about finding a tribe. Or I know that I'm called to reach desolate places, but my schedule, I just don't see how I can do that. Those kinds of things. So we're going to take about 7 to 8 minutes, find your group of 3 to 5, and start talking about this rhythm in your life, how you can increase this rhythm in your life. So if there's anybody out there who's just like, yes, I want to continue cultivating this in my life, but I want to read more, I want to, because this is, we're just brushing the text very just face value. There is a great book. I would call this a tool for your tool belt. There's a great book by Michael Frost called Surprise the World. And it's super short. You could read it. You could definitely read it in a week. You could probably read it in just a couple days. There's 7 little chapters, but they're all super short. And it's just tips on how to cultivate this in your life, how to live missionally in the everyday. When you're a mom, when you're working full time, not in a church, how do I live out this pattern of alone time with Jesus, time with a tribe, and going to the desolate places? How do I do that when I'm busy, I have a family, I have commitments? This book just offers some really, really simple ways to do that. Blessing or serving 3 people in your week, eating with 3 people in your week, just making that space to listen to Holy Spirit, making intentional times to go to the Gospels and learning from the person of Jesus, and then being sent wherever God's sending you, whether that's your workplace, your school, your neighborhood, or maybe even a new place that God might be calling to you. But that's a really, really practical resource if you're praying with your peers and you're like, yeah, I want to cultivate this more in my life. I always talk about the kitchen table. I love encouraging people to use their dining room tables as ministry places. And I want to read just this short excerpt from Surprise the World that just describes this. So the author writes, "It's always interested me that one thing Jesus actually told us to do every time we meet together was eat. It's not lost on me that his detractors regularly accused him of being a drunkard and a glutton. Jesus was neither of these things, but obviously his preparedness to eat and drink with sinners, tax collectors, and prostitutes gave his enemies plenty of ammunition. So when he comes to give his first followers something to do to remember him by, what is it? Remember Luke 22:19, and he took bread, gave thanks, and broke it, and gave it to them, saying, 'This is my body given for you. Do this in remembrance of me.' Yes, the drunkard and the glutton instructed his followers to eat and drink in remembrance of him. It's beautifully subversive. The table ought to be the primary symbol of Christian gathering. It represents hospitality, inclusivity, generosity, and grace. In many churches today, I suppose the primary symbol might be the pulpit or the screen. These churches seem to believe that Jesus said, every time you meet together, listen to a sermon and sing. Now, I'm not against sermons or singing, but if we took Jesus' directive seriously, we'd know that the table is a better metaphor for Christian worship." Does everybody in here have a dining room table? Maybe if you're in college you don't, but you got a sofa or a dining room table. That could be one of your greatest resources in doing ministry. I wanna point out now, and I'm gonna testify just a little bit about what God's been doing in my life. And I'm a crier, so I'm gonna cry. Just prepare yourself. Whew. But right in the middle of this rhythm, what do we see? We see a huge storm. And I want to tell you that before you start reading these books and praying to be able to go to the desolate places, you should prepare yourself for the big storm. There are going to be opposition. There's going to be, I promise you, that when you want to disciple others, when you want to go and do ministry in the hard places, when you even just want more alone time with your Father, the enemy hates it. He hates it. He will do anything to discourage you, to distract you, to beat you down to where you don't want to do those things anymore. But I'm here to say that Jesus is in the middle of those storms, even when it doesn't feel like it. What does Jesus say? He says, "Take courage. It is I. Do not be afraid." In the middle of that storm, take courage. I'm here with you guys. Don't be afraid. About 3 years ago, I got to share with the women of Welcome when we went on our retreat about what God had been just stirring in me and my husband's heart We had just started working for Switch, which you guys, last time I spoke, I talked a little bit about Switch. So we had just been immersed in just knowing, that there was just such big suffering happening around us, sex trafficking, exploitation. And at the time, Rick was in a world missions class that was talking about when the church kind of changed from being mobile to being stationary buildings. And I was just kind of immersed with working with survivors of trafficking for the first time. And it was June 2017, so over 2 years ago, we sat on the porch and we said, somebody has to take the gospel there. Who's taking the gospel there? These women, these men involved in this kind of stuff, in drugs, in commercial sex, they're not coming to church on Sunday morning. And I know you guys would probably make them super welcome if they did. It's not like a welcome issue. It's a we got to go to them issue. Like we were talking about, we've got to be mobile. We've got to be sent to these places. And man, I think right at the get-go, as soon as we kind of made that declaration, a tree fell on our house. It was just like all these things like not good things were happening. We had loved ones that lost loved ones, and there was one thing after another. There was a lot of opposition. And then we put our house on the market, and it didn't sell. And we were like, God, we know that you're calling us to do this work. Like, what is up with? What is going on? And then a few months later, the church that we pastored at just imploded. It just imploded. It fell to pieces. And we just felt more alone than we've ever felt in our whole lives. So we were like, God, where are you in the storm? And I was still praying every day. And I have pretty much since reading Psalm 44, where it says that God gave his people the land they were to inherit, and he gave it smiling. I love the Message translation the best, because it says he smiling as he gave it. He gave them the land. And I was like, God, I know you're going to give us the land, but it really doesn't feel like it. It really doesn't look like it. We even had former students who were gung-ho about doing this ministry with us, and they came up here and applied for jobs and got offered jobs in Greenville, and we were like, yes, it's happening. And then as soon as they went back to Florida to get ready, put in 2 weeks' notice, the job was revoked. They took the offer away. And we were like, God, wow, okay. We know you want us to do this work, but clearly, Greenville seems a little bit shut. Do you want to redirect us? And so, we prayed through. We had no idea when we first set out to plant, that our church would fall apart, that we wouldn't have that body, and just so many things we were just talking to God about. And we just started thinking about where we're closer to family, that Atlanta area. God, do you want to redirect us? We've just gone through this incredible storm. We're still going through this storm. Do you want to redirect us? And when we started talking about Atlanta, it kind of seemed like things were maybe opening up. There was it felt freer to take those steps. Right around Christmas time, we actually told our parents, because it was going to be closer to parents. We said, we're thinking about this, pray about this. And so I know they were all praying that this would be the step, because they want to see their grandkids way more often than they do. But man, there's so much pain in that process. There was so much hardship. And there were so many days of just saying, God, you're so mean. This feels so mean. And it was really a cool thing when Josh did that series on when he specifically talked about the Psalms. And it's actually Psalm 44 at the end. So after it's yeah, you gave us this land, it's why, God, have you completely deserted me? But he was talking about it's okay to be honest with God in those places. And so, I've been more honest with God than I probably ever have in my whole life going through this. God, some days it feels like you're so mean. What are you doing to us? What are you doing to our family? But Friday, we have our house back on the market, by the way. Friday, I did accept a position near Atlanta recently. So we are moving about 15 minutes from my parents. And Friday, we got the winning offer on the house. And we got a call from the university where we're going to be working. And the dean said, hey, there's this church that owns this house, and they want a couple to come live in it for free. Do you want to call them? I was like, oh, yes. So I talked to him, and I could, the house is, it's, the pastor was basically like, yeah, like, come look at it. If you like it, if you can live in it. And we got a little video of it. And so on the same day that we are selling, we got the offer on the house, God provided a house for us to live in this place for free. And, yeah, it's there was so much turmoil. And there's still like unknowns. We still have this desire. We've got lots of like desires in our heart from Father for this next season of life. Church planting, maybe even a nonprofit like switch in this area because sex trafficking is still happening. There's lots of desires in our heart, but on Friday, it was just crazy to take a step back and see, like, God, like, you knew this the whole time. You knew you were going to give us a house. You knew we were going to be closer to family, which is going to be even better for our kids. You knew all these things, and it was so hard to trust. But God, like, your faithfulness for us is just so overwhelming in this moment. And so I just want to, like, caution you, warn you, but encourage you that when you say yes to following Jesus and going to those desolate places, you're going to have some serious storms. You're going to have fear that God has left you. You're going to have all kinds of issues to weather. But man, God is so faithful, and he is there even when it doesn't feel like it.